here we're going to compare the incomplete contracting equilibrium that we've already established is the more general result with a hypothetical alternative, which is what would happen if the participants could engage in a complete contract. So let's think about that. So in a comparison with complete contracts, we have to say that we have to imagine that Patricia has discovered some magical device that can determine the exact quality offered by Armin, and that this information is verifiable. Remember that for information to be verifiable, it must be able to be taken to a third party in a costless manner in order to have the contract enforced. So what this means is that with this magical device, a complete contract is now possible. Patricia can name a price and the exact amount of quality she would like in return. She is no longer constrained by Armin's best response function or his incentive compatibility constraint, and she's instead constrained by his participation constraint. That is, the minimum amount of utility that he requires in order to participate in the exchange, which is the utility that he would receive at his fallback position. We set this with equality, recall, because what they would actually do is offer a tiny bit more, but by setting it equal, we're saying that that is the limiting case. Now, as a result, she no longer provides him a rent, an amount or a payment giving him utility greater than 0. Instead, he's going to receive the utility that he receives at his fallback position, in this case, a utility of 0. So what this also means is that her interaction with Armin is no longer repeated. It's going to be a one-shot game. Because she can simply buy quality in a given period, as if it were a commodity like corn, like we described much earlier in the chapter, then this only needs to be a one-shot interaction. We don't need to have repeated interactions with a contingent renewal contract. She simply buys a one-period amount of quality that she wants from Armin. If she wanted the same quality next period, she just buy it from him again then. There's no reason for her to contract with him or anyone else. She just has to pick someone that she wants to buy quality from. So, in this case, the interaction is no longer a principal-agent interaction because quality is now something that can be enforced by complete contracts. Okay, so that incompleteness of contracts that we need for a principal-agent relationship, that's gone away now. We just have these two parties and it's a buyer and a seller. Okay, so it's Armin selling quality and Patricia buying quality for a specific price. So, what we're going to talk about here is the Nash equilibrium of a take it or leave it interaction in this complete contracting game. And we're going to use the superscript capital C to indicate the complete contracting equilibrium. So, in the new complete contracting game, Patricia is a first mover like she was previously, and she makes a take it or leave it offer to pay Armin PC to purchase his product of quality QC. Okay, so she's paying the complete contracting price to get the complete contracting quality. Armin either then accepts the offer or rejects it. So, with that, the game ends. Now, with this, we're going to get a graph that is similar to previously, but we're no longer going to be using Armin's ISO value curves. What you want to think of here is that we're going to be using Armin's indifference curves in the single period. So you'll recall that we had Armin's single period indifference curves and his indifference map as we have shown here in the upper graph. It's just a little small to remind you of what that looked like. And then in the lower figure, what do we have? We have Armin's fallback indifference curve, where his utility is equal to 0. So we have that fallback indifference curve for Armin, where his utility is equal to 0. Now, point C shows the Nash equilibrium under complete contracts. The Nash equilibrium lies on Armin's participation constraint. Remember that Armin's participation constraint is the minimum amount of utility he needs in order to choose to participate in the exchange. That means it has to be at least equal to what he would get at his fallback position. Often it would be in reality a little bit more than that to incentivize him to deviate, but we set it with equality because that's the limiting case. So, notice, as I said earlier, this is based on his indifference curves because this is operating in a single period. Due to the complete contract, Patricia can now just purchase quality. So it's like someone was purchasing corn or wheat previously. What do you want to think about there? They're just purchasing an amount of what they want at a given price. That's what Patricia is going to be doing here. So we can now interpret Armand's participation constraint as the minimum price at which he is willing to sell, with quality indicated by the height of the curve U0. So if we have his indifference curve there, right, we can say that that is his willingness to sell curve given by the indifference curve at his utility equal to 0. Okay, so what does that mean? If he is offered a price PC, he is willing to sell QC of 1/2. Okay, he is willing to sell quality of that amount. Now, at point C, what quality and price is Armand willing to sell at? Is point C a Nash equilibrium? And is the Nash equilibrium at point C Pareto efficient? So try and think about those two questions, right? I've already said that we're going to have QC and PC at that point, but we have to think about whether or not it's a Nash equilibrium. Now remember, what do we require for a point to be a Nash equilibrium? We require it to be a mutual best response. So think about it in terms of Patricia for a second. Patricia is trying to find the lowest isocost curve. So when we're thinking about Patricia here and the combination PC-QC, is that Patricia's best response? Okay, offering the price PC for the quality QC. Think about that. In terms of Armand, given that there are complete contracts, is his offering QC a best response to Patricia offering PC, the complete contract price? Is it his best response to offer the corresponding quality? So think about that for a second, and then we're going to try and answer it. So the point is indeed a Nash equilibrium. Why is that? Well, Patricia is on her highest feasible isocost curve, like the most steep, I should say. That means actually the lowest isocost curve that she can feasibly obtain in terms of the actual level of the costs. So moving from C2 to C1, she is on a steeper isocost curve than she would have been in the case of incomplete contracts. Can she make that curve any steeper? No, she cannot. She is constrained by Armand's participation constraint. She can't take him below 0 utility in order to be on a yet steeper isocost curve. Now, in terms of Armand, is Armand best responding given that there is a complete contract? Yes, he is too. Notice there would be other lower indifference curves here that we don't have drawn, but there are those lower indifference curves. And so those lower indifference curves would intersect this isocost curve C1. Would those combinations of price and quality be best responses for Armand? Would he choose to be on a lower indifference curve for the price that he is being offered? Imagine an indifference curve over here, for example, with C and a higher quality. Would he choose to be on that indifference curve? The answer is no, he wouldn't. He's going to choose to be on the indifference curve where he can best respond to what Patricia is offering. That is, choosing the lowest quality he feasibly can given her offer. And that is going to be at point C. So it's going to be a Nash equilibrium. We then have the second question, which is the Nash equilibrium point C Pareto efficient? Now remember, what do we need for Pareto efficiency? We need that there is no alternative point that is Pareto superior to point C. So think for yourself to a second, is there an alternative point that is Pareto superior to point C? I'm going to pause, and you should too, to try and answer that question. Okay, so in order for us to understand whether there's an alternative point that is Pareto superior to point C, we would try to use the MRS equals MRS rule. Because remember that Pareto efficient points are indicated by the marginal rates of substitution of the different parties being equal to each other. So what does this mean here? We have Arman's indifference curve. And his indifference curve, the slope of that is the negative of the MRS. Similarly, for Patricia, as the buyer or in the role of previous principal, what we have there, we know that the slope of her isocost curve is equal to the negative of her MRS. So when those two slopes are equal, we know that we have MRS of Arman equal to MRS of Patricia. The marginal rate of substitution of the seller is equal to the marginal rate of substitution of the buyer. Therefore, point C, where the two marginal rates of substitution are equal, is a Pareto efficient point. Now, the next thing is that you might see this figure and think, okay, we have identical quality across the two. We had the comparing complete and incomplete contracts. That's just a kind of what we call a model-specific peculiarity, where we're constructing this model to make it tractable in a basic way, to try and illustrate some of the main ideas that we want to think about here. But that does not mean that people are going to provide the same quality in general in all kinds of principal-agent relationships. That's just something that is specific to the functional forms that we chose here. But notice a big difference. Look at the change in price that is received by the agent. In the incomplete contracting case here, Pn, where Arman also provided quality of 1/2, we see that the price there is equal to 4 times U underbar. In the case of the complete contract, we have that the price at the complete contract point is PC equal to 2 U underbar. What do we see there? In the incomplete contracting case, the price is double what it was in the complete contracting case. The price differs substantially, even though there's a big difference in quality. And this shows that the principal is benefiting because they are no longer having to pay the agent a rent.